to A Well-Designed Business. My name is LuAnn Nigara, and I'm so glad you found this podcast. Together with my husband Vince and our partner Bill, we have grown our company WindowWorks from the ground up. So I know and I understand the challenges you face in running your interior design business. I also know that your talent alone isn't enough to ensure your success. So on this podcast, we talk about strategies and practical steps to help you grow your business. But make no mistake about it, we have our share of fun here too, mixed in with those aha moments that I love so much. This isn't fluff. Nobody has time for that. Whether you are a new interior designer or a seasoned designer, I am here to help you create and to manage the kind of interior design firm that you dream of. It's straight talk and it's action. Are you ready? Let's get started. Hi, welcome to A Well-Designed Business. It's Power Talk Friday. On my podcast intake form, if you want to be on the podcast, I ask a question. What do you do in your business to promote and support diversity within your design business? Okay, it's important because I want to know the small and the big ways that each of us are making contributions in this area, making improvements in this area, right? Because that's how we learn. We get an idea, we get an eye opener, we get an aha, okay? And it's something that needs to be addressed, recognized, and improved upon in each of our businesses and in this industry in particular. All of us have different needs, different viewpoints. We are diverse in a variety of ways. So how can we create an environment where everyone can feel like they belong? This is the question that my guest today, Bernadette Smith, founder and CEO of the Equity Institute, will answer. Now, first of all, understand, in Bernadette's business, she typically only works with large companies to help them promote and develop this topic and to understand it for their particular company. She doesn't typically do this work with smaller companies like ours. However, Bernadette is another heroic public speaking alumni that I met through their program, just like I met Heather Hansen, Anna Nelson, Katie McDonald, and Adrienne Cotton. And just like these women, after working with Bernadette, I learned of her podcast and I love it. And I've come to know her and her mission to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. So I asked her, even though we're not her target clientele, if she would share her knowledge and experience with us. And in the conversation today, you will easily see why Bernadette said yes. Bernadette is very passionate about this topic, and she knows it's her calling to educate all of us. So I'd like you to meet my friend, Bernadette. Hi, Bernadette. Thanks so much for joining me on A Well-Designed Business today.
Oh my gosh, it is such a delight to be here, and I really enjoy every moment I get to spend with you, so I'm delighted to be on your show. Thank you so much for having me.
I know. I almost jumped out of my seat when we started on the Riverside and I saw you in the frame. I'm like, it's Bernadette.
I know. It's been too long.
I know. It's so funny. So I'll give people a little backstory. So I met you through HPS, another heroic public speaking alumni, where we know Katie McDonald from, and Adrienne Cotton and Anna Nelson and Heather Hansen, right? But the thing is, what was funny was we went through the whole HPS thing, and a lot of us have podcasts on HPS. And I found myself one day, maybe 3 or 4 months after our last meeting, and I was like, let me listen to Bernadette's podcast. And I binged it for like a 2-hour ride back from the beach. I was just like, it is so enjoyable. 5 things in 5 minutes.
15.
5 things in 15 minutes. And it just is actionable, makes you think how I can be a better business owner, show up in the world better, bring this conversation of inclusion into the whole everyday life. And I just think what you do is fantastic. And I just admire you so much for doing it.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that. My philosophy is that when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, there are a lot of people who feel blamed or shamed, or they're afraid of saying the wrong thing, or they don't know how to learn what they don't know, and they're afraid of asking. And, I think cancel culture contributes to those fears of getting it wrong. And so my approach to this work is really about hey, like, we're all in this together. We're all learning along the way. Here are some of the silly, ridiculous mistakes that I made, the times in which I have really embarrassed myself, including in front of clients, by saying the wrong thing. But hey, I recovered and you can recover too. And we're all in this together. And so what my podcast and my newsletter that goes along with it is called Bringing Good Vibes to DEI, focusing on doing more of what's working right, learning from really inspirational stories from all different size businesses, from different industries. And so it's been a really delightful experience, sort of sharing these good vibes with the world in a variety of formats.
Yeah, I love this format that you do because it really does. It makes you think. You just start to go, oh, and to your point, it's inspirational. You're just like, yep, okay, I can go back in the ring. I could do a better job, like, right?
Exactly. And one of my goals with the newsletter in particular is really to share my experiences and my vulnerabilities and my self reflections and the things that I'm learning as I do this work. Because again, I don't want to be this like holier than thou, judgmental speaker, diversity. Like people just shut down, right? And so
Yes,
the reality is that diversity is here. We're
yes.
all diverse in a variety of ways. And so how do we just create an environment where everyone feels like they can do their best, where everyone
Yeah.
feels like they have a place at the table, where they feel like they belong? And I know that sounds kind of idealistic, but I feel like it's my purpose.
Yes, yes. Well, you live in it very well, and you do bring it to each of us with that level of compassion and that level of you're going to make a mistake and you're going to say the wrong thing, but you know what? You come back. You come back and you try again and you do it a different way. And so, here's the thing. At this point, you have a pretty nice sized company here, and you are responsible for bringing this DEI conversation to big companies that have 2, 3, 500, 1,000 employees and helping them really develop this conversation and this practice in their companies. And so that's a big thing. And if I had heard about you and knew that was your focus, I don't know that I would have reached out to interview you because you're not necessarily working in smaller companies like that's in my audience. But I love your message on it, Bernadette. And the interior design industry needs to get on the train. They need to understand. And I do feel like your newsletter and your podcast do bring valuable information. So, but you have this experience coming from the wedding industry that is very parallel with the interior design
Yes.
industry. So tell us a little bit about that experience and how this morphed now into this big company that you've got,
Yeah,
this big
that's a
mission that you have.
story. Let's get a cocktail and talk about that story. So, very, very similar industries as far as I understand. I started my business in the wedding industry in 2004, which when I was living in Boston, Massachusetts, and Massachusetts became the first state in the country to have marriage equality for same sex couples. So my goal was to start a business to be like an activist wedding planner to help these couples navigate a very traditional industry with a lot of small businesses in it. And back at the time, only about a third of Americans supported same-sex marriage. And so I really wanted to be an advocate for these couples, and especially because the industry is so bride and groom centric. Even
Yes.
still to this day,
Today.
it's
Yes.
very
Yes.
bridal, right? And so
Mhm.
I really wanted to make sure that I was working with couples that I could give them a really positive experience. So that was how it all started. As time went on, I got a coach, and we all need coaches, right? So I got a coach who said, hey, you know what? You're thinking too small. There are so many businesses within this industry that don't know anything about LGBTQ inclusion. And you've learned these things. You've got to teach others. So it was right around when Twitter was first invented, and I started connecting with other wedding professionals on Twitter and social media and writing blog posts. Eventually started getting asked to speak at wedding conferences, wrote 3 books all about LGBTQ inclusion in the wedding industry, and really started kind of doing the speaker circuit over in that space. And things were going really well. Marriage equality then came to New York. moved to New York, which is my home state, with my wife and son, started planning weddings there. All of a sudden, I'm planning like 6-figure weddings and $250,000 weddings on Fire Island. And I was like, okay, whatever happened to this activist part, that is no longer really, I was really lost my sense of purpose, right? Because, when at that level, especially when you're working in the New York market, you're going to encounter bridezillas and groomzillas, like pretty serious, intense ones.
Yes.
And you know what? They're spending a lot of money, and I get it.
Right.
I absolutely.
Exactly. And it's one day.
Yes.
That's it. No do-overs.
I absolutely get it. But it just wasn't, I started to realize, like, this isn't what I signed up for. I got away from my sense of purpose. And also around the same time, I got divorced. And so, my whole life was falling apart, and I was feeling kind of burnt out personally, certainly burnt out professionally. And, I knew that it was going to be time to evolve myself into whatever was next. And it took a few years for me to really figure out what that was. But eventually I moved to Chicago, which is where I now live, have a new partner. I mean, this has been 10 years now. Wrote my first book, not about weddings. And
so it's your fourth book, the first one not about weddings.
That's right. My book is called Inclusive 360, Proven Solutions for an Equitable Organization. And it's really about helping organizations of all sizes be more inclusive, not just of LGBTQ plus folks, but of everyone, and really helping them figure out some of the simple things that they can do to create a space where everyone, both customers and employees, feel like they can do their best work. So I have a lot of experience with those small and mid-sized businesses from the wedding industry, for sure.
Right? I mean, but what I love is, I love that, that you might have for a moment, right? But you didn't, like 40 years from now, wake up and go, hey, what happened to that really important thing that I wanted to accomplish? That you were able to reset and to look at and say, am I really happy? Because, it's funny, Bernadette, a lot of designers become designers because they're plugging away at different industries, and they're like, wait a second. What I really wanted to was be an interior designer. And there becomes that line in the sand, whether they're 30, 50, 60, and it's like, that's it. I'm going to do it. And so I love that, you, first of all, you proved to yourself that you could take this business from nothing and build it up to be doing $250,000 weddings. So that's like a level, to me, that's, a wedding planner is about the closest in my mind to an interior designer, with the number of details that have to be done, an event planner, because the myriad of details are just so onerous. And everything matters. Everything matters. There's nothing that's like, well, whatever, just throw that there. Who cares? Like, everything matters.
Yes.
So hats off to you for creating a business of that level, but then to not get sucked into it and wake up and say, I left my mission. So I love that. I love it.
Sometimes the universe will humble me. And divorce will definitely do that, right? I mean, I was a workaholic. You don't become a wedding planner with $250,000 clients in New York without being a workaholic.
No, you're on beck and call 24/7.
And you have to be, you have to constantly show up. All of the networking, all of the industry sort of expectations of just sort of being present and connecting with folks, because that's how you get business, right? And so there's always a lot of that back then. And, I certainly had to go through it as I was evolving my business and emerging from my professional identity crisis, which it really was.
I can imagine.
I went from hyper niche to, very
the entire
broad
world that needs help.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Not easy to do. Not easy to do.
Yeah. And I had to, completely reintroduce myself to a completely different network. And I mean, I was pretty well known in the wedding industry.
I imagine you were.
Speaking at conferences around the world. I still have an online course for that. So, I was very in that space. And then when I left, I was like, pretty much, I'm out. Like there was really no looking back.
That's all. I think, it just shows the conviction to yourself. The courage, like my mother always had this said, do you have the courage of your conviction is what she used to say to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Do you have the courage of your conviction? So this is important to you. So where's the courage to go make it happen? I'm like, okay, I got my courage.
Yes,
Right?
exactly. Well, my very last wedding was at the Four Seasons in Manhattan near Central Park, and I was happy to go out on such a high level and with a wonderful couple that reminded me of my early days. So
Oh,
all
that's
good.
amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So now, obviously your primary work is servicing these super huge companies and really putting actionable strategies and systems and things in place that they can come to both their clients and their employees, like you said, fully open mind, open heart, and doing the right thing, right? But for the rest of us that have 1 or 10 or 5 employees, we do have your podcast, we have your book. But you also have some strategies that you want to
Sure.
share with us, right?
Absolutely. I think that one of the big things that a lot of people do on individual levels, just as we're working with our clients, our coworkers, whomever, is we make assumptions about folks. We make assumptions about folks all the time because a lot of times we're moving quickly and we just sort of default to what we know or what's been said before or what's been done before. And sometimes we just use the assumptions as a shortcut. And sometimes if someone's having a bad day, we make an assumption about what that's about too, or we take it personally. But what I think is really universal is that instead of making assumptions about folks, we need to ask better questions. We need to be a little bit more curious. And I think that definitely goes true for folks from underrepresented groups. So whether it's customers, an interracial customer or client of yours, that you're meeting for the first time, or an LGBTQ couple or client that you're meeting for the first time, or coworker or someone who comes into your shop, you don't want to make assumptions about anything related to their dynamic, related to their relationship, related to anything. So you always want to ask open-ended questions because we don't want to embarrass ourselves, right? We don't want to put ourselves in a situation where we're trying to recover and we've lost the trust of this potential client before we've even gotten started. And so a lot of the work that I do with my clients, regardless of what size business they have, is I teach a tool called the ARC method, and ARC stands for Ask, Respect, Connect. So instead of making assumptions, we should be asking better questions, right? I think we all know what happens when we make assumptions. There's that, make an ass out of you and me, right? So asking with open-ended questions from a place of curiosity but not confrontation is really key. So instead of making an assumption about what the couple could be, what their dynamic is, or who's the decision maker, or anything like that, we just want to make sure we're asking them really open-ended questions. And the same thing with the forms we use. So if you have intake forms, you want to make sure that you're not asking gender, or if you are, you're having a third gender option because they're a full quarter of Gen Z is identifying as LGBTQ+, right? So we want to make sure that we're not putting any of our clients in boxes. So we want to make sure our forms are updated. We have pronouns on our forms, things of that nature. So the A is about the ask. The A in the ARC method is always about ask. The R is about respect. That means you're not interrupting, you're not dismissing. The basic tenets of customer service, respect, of course. But you're not checking your email in the middle of a Zoom meeting or in the middle of an important conversation. You're just being really present, being an active listener. And then the C is for connect. And that's really to tie things up. It's to paraphrase, to validate what you heard, and to sort of tie up this conversation. It doesn't need to be a long, drawn out conversation. It doesn't need to be something that's awkward. If you just ask, respect, connect, you can really get clarity in any situation. You can connect across differences. A common question that I get, especially in the past few years, is about what do you say to an employee who might, let's just say you have a Black employee and there was a mass shooting in Jacksonville, a few weeks back. What do you say? Do you just ignore it? Do you pretend like nothing happened? How do you provide support? How, if they show up for work on Monday and they're a little bit distracted or they're a little bit more somber, do you Do you assume that it's personal? Do you take it personally, or do you make any assumptions at all about what could be going on? How about instead of making any assumptions at all, you just say, hey, I saw what happened in the news, what happened in Jacksonville. That is the worst. And I can't even imagine what it would be like to have that happen to my community. If you want to talk about it or anything else, I'm always here for you. So really,
It's powerful.
yeah, just really simple. You're not making assumptions. You're sort of showing empathy in that initial way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's interesting because the summer that George Floyd was killed, I'm not going to tell you I knew to do it. No, no, ma'am. Like, I was taught by somebody like yourself in a conversation. Maybe I read it at whatever it was, but I remember that exact piece of advice. It was, if you have Black employees, don't assume that it's, they care about awnings today. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're affected by it, but like, you can't even begin to wrap your brain around the way, like you said, it's their community, how they're affected. And we do have a very diverse employee staff at all three of our businesses. But at that time we had a Black installer. And I remember it took, I wouldn't say it took a lot of courage for me. I wouldn't say like, oh my God, I was afraid, but I felt uncomfortable from the standpoint of, I was like, well, is he going to care that I care? Like, it was almost like that. It was like, I was almost afraid that he was going to be like, Lou, what are you doing? Like, I'm not talking to you about this. Right. Like, but I took it from someone like yourself who I knew it was a good thing to do, a kind, caring, good leadership thing to do. And so one day after a team meeting, I asked him to come over and sit down. And I said, how you doing, buddy? Like, this is crazy what's happening. And, I just want to let you know that Vinny and I are here. If you want to talk about it, I said, I'm not even going to put words in your mouth, what you would need at this moment. But I don't want you to think that we wouldn't help and do whatever. And it was crazy, Bernadette, because I could see his whole body breathe. Like, he literally breathed. And he was a young guy. It's not like he's my peer. You know what I'm saying? Like, and he just looked at me and he was like, that really means a lot to me. And I was like, whoa, oh, sweetie, you have some work to do here. Like, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I'm sure he'll remember that, right? And I think that those are the moments that really matter with folks, because we can get so busy focused on our business. For
and
owners,
our feelings and how we're processing not the event, but in this moment. I literally was like, well, is he going to be like, what do I want to talk to you for? You're like an old lady and you're my boss. And, like, I just was all in that head. And I was like, LuAnn, this is good advice. Just do it. Just trust the expert.
Yeah. I definitely went through that as well. I mean, for years prior to 2020, I thought I was an ally of Black people and other people of color or people with disabilities. I thought I was that ally. But when it really came down to it, I was afraid of saying the wrong thing. Right. I was afraid, again, of accidentally offending someone. So I never said anything. Right. I stayed in my little gay lane. I mean, anytime I was invited
fight the
to
fight there, but
right.
the rest of you, I'm out.
That's right. Anytime I'd been invited to like a Black Lives Matter rally or a fundraiser for an inner city school, I'd be like, I have my thing. I do the gay thing. That's my thing. Right. And so what I want people to think about is, do you stay in your lane?
Yes.
What is your lane? And, that lane can be really, really comfortable.
And narrow.
Yeah. But what amazing richness there is to be found on the other side when we can genuinely connect with people who are different from us.
I think what it is on this show, Bernadette, we talk all the time about charging your value.
Sure.
And making sure that, if that a room is going to take 20 hours to do, then say it's going to take 20. I'm an advocate, say it's going to take 25, right? Because if you can save them $1 at the end instead of ask for $2 more, way better, right?
Sure.
But the thing is, is until you actually do it, it's this concept out there. And then you one day you do it and you've charged the right amount. You felt really good about it. They had a good experience, and you very rarely will make that error again of not valuing your own time and charging right. And that was the experience of talking with that employee. I was like, oh, this is your job. You own this company. You are the leader of this company. And this is your job to look at everybody and how they are and who they are and acknowledge them. And the thing is, it's funny because you talked about staying in your lane and looking to see, could you expand? I just had a designer recently DM me a video that was like, that's great that you think that, but if you don't call it out when you see otherwise, then, you're just as, ineffective. And that's not even the word, by the way, that was used in the DM or in the video that was sent. But that's the thing. It's whether it's for, I just had Jessica Bantam on the show, and I know you interviewed her too. I mean, we both like madly in love. Like, I have a major crush on her now, I have to tell you.
She's amazing.
But she talked about whether it's, exclusion because of size or race or ethnicity or sexual preference or gender. It's not just one or the other. It's all the things. And I think when you really start to process it that way, you realize that it really, like you started by saying, it's all of us that need to be part of this conversation, right?
Absolutely. And I think it's also a good exercise for folks to reflect on what they have, what's their role in all of this. I mean, so yes, I am a lesbian, and that is sort of my big diversity angle, right? But I'm also white. I also own my own house. I'm neurodiverse. I have no disabilities. I'm average size. Like, I have a master's degree. I have a lot of privilege.
Right.
A lot.
Mm-hmm.
And what I believe is that I didn't earn most of it. Yeah, I earned my degree, my ability to buy my house, but most of my privilege, most of my power, I didn't earn. And so because of that, I really feel like I have a responsibility. I have a sense of purpose for me that comes from knowing how much power I have just by accident.
Right.
Right. And I think that's just an important perspective for folks to kind of reflect on.
It is interesting. If you've done any of the work on that reflection, it's eye-opening. I can tell you for a fact, I didn't have any thoughts in that regard ever in my entire years on this planet until the summer of 2020. It was just like, yeah, I'm white and that's what it is. Like, whatever, right? Yep. Like, I just didn't think about it one way or another. And since then, it's hard not to really, like you said, really recognize how so much more is available to certain groups of us than to others, just because, like you said, I didn't particularly earn 80% of the things that are available to me, and excluded to others. It's what's interesting to me, Bernadette, you've been working in this area for 20 years now, and I'm having conversations for 3, okay? And as many people as are open to learning, it just feels so, I don't want to feel like Debbie Downer. Like, I feel like, yes, thank God we're finally, more people are willing to talk about it. But there's still so many that are like, nuh-uh, that's not different for them. That's not different for that group. That's not different for that. And it's just like, it's like, to me, it's like debating if the sky is blue. It's like, it's so obvious that it's different for certain groups. Don't you think?
I think it's obvious, but I think that because a lot of people feel left out of the diversity conversation, they don't know where they fit in, right? And so I think...
And they're accustomed to being in the middle of everything and being the kingpins.
That's exactly right. And
serious.
So if they don't feel included in this conversation, or their perspective, or they're not asked to weigh in, or they're not asked to reflect on their own diversity, then I think that we're excluding people, especially people that have the most power and influence to really make the biggest difference. Deloitte did a study a few years ago, of employees all across sectors, all across industries in the US workforce. And they found that 61% of employees they cover or they downplay some part of who they are at work. They don't talk about what happened in Jacksonville over the weekend. They're in the closet about their sexual orientation. They downplay their race. They're private about their religion, whatever. 61%. Okay. But 45% of straight white men cover also.
Oh.
45%. And these are people who could be downplaying medical problems, financial
or mental
problems,
illness is a big one.
family
right?
stuff,
Family mental illness. Yep.
And these are folks who are struggling at work too, because they have these distractions and they have these concerns that they don't want to talk about at the workplace, or because they're afraid it's going to make them feel weak, or if they have to take a sick day for a cancer treatment or a screening, like they're private about this too. And so the reality is that most of us have something going on. Right. And so
Right.
whether we're customers or whether we're employees, most of us have something going on. And what I believe is that we can all do our part to create an environment where more and more folks can just talk about it, can just share the good stuff and the bad stuff. And I think that it requires intention. It doesn't really happen by accident. We have to be intentional about it. Inclusion
Right.
requires intention. But most of us have something going on, even the people in power, even the straight white men. And we need to keep everyone in this conversation.
Yeah. That is, it's true. I mean, there are broad categories and broad lanes that we could put people in.
Sure.
But at the end, everybody is a human,
Yeah.
right? And whether you are, admitting to yourself, this situation, whatever it might be, it would be rare to find someone that didn't have something that they could say, whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Sure.
Yeah, it's, but it is getting it out there and talking about it and leaving the space for the thing that one person is living and dealing and grappling with is completely different than your thing. So it doesn't mean their thing doesn't matter. It's like, that's the problem, right?
That's right.
It's like, oh, who cares about that? Like it's like, no, that's the point, right? Everybody gets a spot at the table to talk about.
Exactly. And here's a tip, because I'd imagine that a lot of folks who listen to your show own their own business. So you're leaders, right? You have a team. And, here's something that any one of you can do and start taking into your business on a daily or a weekly basis, is that before you get into your team meeting, do connection before content. Everyone go around and share something that's going great this week, something that's not going great, personally or professionally. Everyone sort of share a rosebud thorn or highs and lows or whatever you want to call it. And then if you have someone on your team who's seems to be struggling when they share their low, do a one-on-one, pull them aside, have that ARC method conversation and check in more. But having that little bit of structure creates the space for people to start talking about what doesn't work and what's not going well. And especially as leaders, the more we as leaders talk about our mistakes, our insecurities, our issues, what it was like when we first started the company, what it was like when we didn't fit in, what it was like when fill in the blank. When we talk about that, it gives other folks permission to do the same. Now, of course, there is a fine line between unpacking all of your baggage, right? We all know, we've all had people who like to do that, and that comes with the territory. But, put some boundaries around it, and I think that when you start to have those types of conversations, you're giving folks more permission to be themselves, and then you're going to get better work out of everyone.
Right. Well, not only, it's so funny because I'm thinking to myself as you're talking, I'm thinking probably somebody might be thinking to themselves, well, what do I really need to do this for? Like I don't mean be inclusive. I don't mean the big work of DEI,
Sure.
but this, thorn and rosebud, connect before content, right? And the thing is that it's not going to be effective if it's something that you remember to do once a month, because then people are going to stay with top level. Oh, we call it wins at Window Works. We do wins. Oh, my win is that, Lucy came for, took Lucy to the pony rides, like whatever the darn win is. Right. But if we aren't doing it on a regular basis, you're not really going to get real wins or real losses out of me. You're going to get the what's the word, like the blabbermouth stuff. Like, it's not the word I want, but
shallow.
You know what I mean? Yes, exactly. It's not going to be of anything of consequence. But the thing is, it occurred to me that a real positive ROI of creating meaningful content, meaningful conversation among your team is now your team is better equipped to have meaningful conversations with your clients, because they're seeing in real life how people express themselves and how people react to it. And like, to your point, how somebody puts their foot in their mouth, and maybe you all take a moment to teach somebody that that's not the way you answer that. Right. But it's like, it's almost like what it reminds me of, Bernadette. It reminds me of, you learn how to function in school by having conversations at the dinner table with your parents.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
Like, if you can pick the kids out that do not have dinner table conversation with their parents. Like, if they get to be 9, 10, 12, 13 years old and there's no habit for that kid can't talk. That kid is right?
That explains a lot about my childhood. No, it's because my parents were so much older. My parents had me when they were in their early 40s, and they were Irish immigrants. And so my school conversations were probably like talking to adults. Like, my siblings were all out of the house. So it was probably like that explains why I didn't have many friends for a while.
You're so funny in that.
For the longest
time.
But
you know what I'm saying?
I do, yeah.
Like, it's where you learn in a group that cares about you and gives you the language and the tools to take that to the clients. Because as a business owner, that's what you want. You want all clients to feel heard, respected, and understood.
Absolutely. And that's something that the ARC method provides a structure for. And folks can actually have conversation starters if they download the ARC method cheat sheet, which I'm sure you'll put in the show notes. But
yes, we will definitely put that in the show notes, 110%. So you said to me that there are 4 things every business owner can do to promote diversity, equity, inclusion. I know we've talked about, and I'm not sure, is like the ARC method is one. This connect before content is probably another.
Sure. Yeah. So one thing is definitely going to be to not make any assumptions about the folks on your team or the clients, any of that. So we're not making assumptions. And one antidote to that is to follow the ARC. Another thing that every business owner can do is to put an equality statement right on your website and make it crystal clear that you do not discriminate, that you welcome everyone, that you are an LGBTQ plus affirming business, that you support diversity. Like, make that clear, because you know what? The folks from underrepresented groups who are potentially hiring you, they're going to be stalking your website and your social media for any kind of clue that you are affirming. And so how are you making it obvious that you welcome all kinds of folks? So that's going to be the second tip. My third tip is to make sure that you were reflecting diversity in your social media content and in your any sort of images that you have. Not only reflect diversity of clients if you have them and they're willing to be in your images, but also showcase some of the diversity on your staff, right? Because that's another way that you can send that signal, and also to amplify the voices and just amplify the potential of the folks on your team, to give them a shout out, make them feel really proud that they are representing your brand. Showcase them on your social media as well. Give them that space. Show them that level of trust. So there's a few, three of the 4 tips right there.
Yeah, I love it. It's great. The thing is, it has to be followed through. And I know you know this, with action. We can't just put a statement and not do it. We can't like put a picture up and then, really not give that person on our team, a voice to say how we show up as leaders and owners and treat them. Right. So we've got to connect the two, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And my fourth tip is really to think about who are the partners that you do business with? Who are the suppliers that you're doing business with? The other vendors that you refer to? And do you have a diverse slate of folks that you can refer your clients and customers to? People that you trust, you're not trying to lower the bar. People that you trust that happen to come from other underrepresented groups or happen to be from diverse backgrounds. Make sure that they are part of your referral network as well.
Right. Right. I love it. I love it. It's so good. It's so good. So now in your book, Inclusive 360, so, this is, look, we could get this on Amazon. It's good reading, right? We need to like just open our brain. Yeah.
No, it really is. Like it's actually, as far as a diversity book goes, it's very fun. It's a fast read. I have lots of personal stories in there. I talk about my son a little bit. So it's a really, if you like my energy, then the energy definitely comes through in the book.
I love it. I know, right? That's so good. I love that.
Hashtag
and then
on
of
brand.
course, yes, right. Stay on brand,
Yeah.
right? And then the podcast, of course. And that is, like I said, I met you in person. I worked with you every single month in person for 4 months, 3 days a month for 4 months, and just connected with you as a human. And then the nail in the coffin was listening to the show. I was just like, OMG, like this is awesome. I just love it. So, and it is what you said. It is the mission to share the information in a way that I think makes you look in the mirror, but doesn't make you look in the mirror and throw it away. It's like, okay, let me just keep looking here and see what else I got to find. And all right, I can do that because that's the only way we're going to be better, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because we're otherwise going to default to what's been done before, what's familiar, what's comfortable, right? And we get very comfortable in our lanes. And so we do need those reminders that there's a lot of beauty to be found, a lot of joy to be found in connecting with folks who are different from us and expanding our reach and our networks.
I love it. I love it. Oh my goodness. You are so awesome. I appreciate you so much for being here today and having this conversation with me. We will put the links for your book, the podcast, the newsletter, all the things in our resources, on the show notes, in the newsletter that goes out about it, because there is a lot of goodness in what you're doing in this world, Bernadette. And I'm so glad that you are living in your mission because you're helping the rest of us be better. Thank you.
Thank you. That's really wonderful of you to say. And huge fan of you. I'm glad to be friends with you because as a business owner, you've been in business longer than I have. And I see you as a role model because we need more badass women in the world.
Well, you know what? I will identify as that. That's for sure.
Exactly. So thank you for being that for me.
Thank you.
I always love a story about someone who comes into their true calling. For Bernadette, she was very successful wedding planner and activist for LGBTQ inclusion, right? And even though she was crazy, wildly successful, writing 3 books for the industry and planning weddings that were $250,000, that's insanely successful. But it hit her that it wasn't her purpose. So after 10 years, she pivoted. Sound familiar? I know many of you have had this exact experience and how you came to interior design. It was your passion and it was sitting on a shelf. Okay. Now Bernadette is helping big companies take actionable steps and use strategies to connect people who are different from them, both clients and employees. But regardless of the size of our company, it is the responsibility of each of us to do this. So how? Right? Things happen all the time. You see them, you know. Bernadette says that ignoring things or making an assumption is the worst thing we can do. You can't think you are an ally, but then do and say nothing. And I understand. You heard my story. I've been in the position of not knowing what the right thing to do is. I was so focused on how I felt about bringing up a certain situation that I didn't maybe take the action and do the things I should have done. But I am very grateful to have been well advised to instead provide support and speak up. Now, what Bernadette is saying is to stop making assumptions about people and how they might react. Think about it. Do you do this? It's okay if you do. Many of us do. That's why Bernadette does what she does. She helps us see. And that's why we have these conversations on this show regularly. This is the steps to getting to the other side. And it's more about, trying to help each of us be self-aware. Try to stop yourself for a second and recognize if you are making assumptions. Bernadette's ARC method, ask, respect, and connect, helps with this self-exploration, right? Ask open-minded questions out of curiosity, not confrontation. Be present and be an active listener when you do ask a question. Don't have the answer in your head looking for it to be supported by whatever you hear in the other person. Be open. Actually hear their answer. Okay? You can exercise this at your team meetings, at the autopsies of your projects. Ask around the table. In my business, we talk about the highs and lows on Monday mornings, okay? Not only are you giving the team permission to be themselves, but it's a great model for your employees that they will bring to others, including clients. You want all peoples to be heard, right? Your clients, your employees, your colleagues, everything, everyone. Everyone wants to be heard, respected, and understood. It's simple. It's not rocket science. Okay. I was shocked at the statistics that Bernadette shared that 61% of people downplay who they are in their race, their religion, sexuality, health, everything. Okay. And why would they? Why would someone do that? Because they don't feel safe. And we have to reflect on our personal role in not creating an environment that allows for safety. There's just so much inspiration and passion that comes from Bernadette. I adore you, Bernadette. I love the work that you do. I appreciate this conversation. This is something that I will strive to continuously improve on. And I hope that this conversation with Bernadette inspires you to do the same. And I want to say, if you want to dive deeper into this, I encourage you to buy Bernadette's book, Inclusive 360. It is not only informative and actionable, but it's an easy read. And definitely check out her podcast. Meeting Bernadette in person is one layer, like so kind and considerate and open and just smiling, like she's a beautiful lady. And that got me in. And then as I would ride back and forth to HPS, I would listen to her podcast, and that hook, line, and sinkered me to Bernadette. So I highly recommend you listen to her podcast, 5 Things in 15 Minutes. It's awesome. Thank you, Bernadette, for being here. I appreciate you so much. We need more people like you in our world. And thank you for joining me today. Decide to be excellent. Thank you for joining me today. This podcast is a production of LuAnn Niagara, Inc. If you want to know more about me, my books, or LuAnn University, go to LuAnnNiagara.com. And if you are interested in having WindowWorks help you with your next window treatment or awning project in the New York, New Jersey metro area, go to WindowWorksNJ.com to learn more. Have an excellent day.